Welcome to the final video in the Oolite Unmodded Let's Play Poorly series, Episode 9. The background video here is a repeat of Episode 8, so don't worry about paying too much attention to it. My goal in this final episode is to give a kind of debrief about my experience with the vanilla unmodded version of Oolite 1.90. I'll talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and how it compares to a way too heavily modded version of the game. So first up, what I liked. It should be obvious to anyone who has gone through the whole series that my favorite aspect of vanilla Oolite is the quality of the light and shadows. There is an incredible richness that comes from limiting the ambient light value in the game. Lighting and shadow make decent textures look amazing and add to the feeling of realism of the space around you. The textures that were available to me in the modded version of Oolite, which is to say all of the ambience OXPs that I added in, did improve the textures and visual quality of most of the objects I encountered. However, overall, the ambient lighting was much higher. There may be a way to adjust that, I don't know, but it did mean that the fantastic lighting model and the really fantastic shadows didn't come through nearly as well. In unmodded Oolite, I could find myself flying to the dark side of a planet that is just on the edge of dawn, and I could fly close to a station shrouded in darkness. That wasn't really possible in the 400 plus OXP version I played before. I also liked that the equipment lists were relatively easy to parse. Because the number of equipment items was much more limited in this run, and because probably half of the equipment was locked behind needing other equipment that I never bought, the outfitter screen was much simpler and easier to navigate. The same is true for the F4 screen, where I could just pick up missions and so on. There just wasn't that much there, which meant that I could easily see what was there, so it was uncluttered, which again is entirely due to the fact that the OXPs, I had just so many on there. But I have to be pretty honest here about the vanilla game. Those two things, lighting and shadow, and the limitations of the F3 and F4 pages, were pretty much all I liked about this version compared to the modded one. There were a fair number of quality of life features of the OXPs that I had installed that really deserve to be folded into the base game. The biggest of these has to be the way the market is presented. The lack of a galactic differential and an easy way to see how much the cargo I have cost me when I bought it made trading in vanilla much harder. I ended up limiting myself to a few goods that I knew would have decent markups, regardless of the actual amounts. I wasn't making decisions anymore. To make good decisions, I would have had to write down information on a piece of paper, and that's not good for the game. Having the player use external tools like paper and pencil is very old school. It comes from limitations in computation back in the 80s and early 90s, but we haven't had to do that in a really long time. The other big feature that deserves to be part of the base game is sound. The BGS OXP that I had in the previous series added a significant amount of immersion to the game that was sorely lacking in vanilla. Engine sounds are important. True, there is no sound in space, but here's the thing. You're not in space, you're in a cockpit. You can reasonably expect to hear your own ship make noise. I do think music is also important, but it's not crucial in the same way that sound effects are. I'd be fine leaving music to the OXPs, but a greater palette of sound effects is essential. I also didn't like the spatial relationships among the stellar bodies. The stars were too large and too close to the planets, and all too uniform in size. The various OXPs that modify these elements are essential in my opinion. The vanilla Oolite universe is very sparsely populated. Back in the 1980s, that was a choice demanded by computation limitations, and in Oolite, it's a choice demanded by the underlying decisions to create a version of the game that conformed to the original as much as possible. But I think that the game needs more than that, and that's the thing I want to talk about most of all here. It's going to be controversial among dedicated Oolite players, modders, and certainly the chain of developers, and that's okay, but I do think it's important to state the question. What is Oolite? When it began over a decade ago, Oolite was an attempt to model the original Oolite game for modern Macintosh computers. And by modern, of course, we mean the ones from the early 2000s, not the ones we've got now. Over time, a number of features were added, in particular the ability to extend the game with expansions or OXPs. The addition much later on of an expansion manager and the shift from loose file mods to zip mods made the game even more easily modded. Especially for players, they could just go through the list and do what I did, which is just eat everything, just take it in, add as much as their game could handle. This allowed the base game to retain its original design goal of serving as a manifestation of the original Oolite. It offloaded the design goal of a bigger, richer, more modern game to the expansion creators, to the modders. But there are drawbacks to modding. No one should be as crazy as I am and put 400 OXPs in the game. That's just a mess. Even though it mostly worked, it still was a mess. But even if you limit yourself more and stick with a collection of mods that serve a particular purpose, like changes to planets and stellar bodies, or just add a bunch of ships to the game, or improve the quality of life issues like the market and so on, you're running into a situation where you're having to deal with multiple parallel development cycles. Some mods will never be updated again, even if Oolite goes above version 1.90. Some mods haven't been touched in half a decade or more. Some were released with bugs that hobbled their functionality or made them incompatible with other critical mods. And what I have seen from folks on the forum, they make an effort. A lot of people are making a good effort to update these mods and take over development and make some changes that were needed and so on. So this is no one's fault. It's the nature of the thing, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to be. Mods are what they are. They follow different development cycles, and the modders are under no obligation to do anything for anybody. That's fine. And there is only Oolite unmodded. There is a base game. And while the development history of the game is varied, and there have been multiple handoffs over the years, there is, at least in theory, a single chain of custody for the game's base layer. It's the authoritative build. It's the code on which all other modders depend, and the code they are obligated to respect. But when I answer the question, what is Oolite, my answer cannot be Oolite unmodded. I don't think that game is playable. Not in 2021. It is without question a superior game to the original Elite, which is both its inspiration and its North Star. But it is not a game for 2021 and beyond. There are just too many expectations for players today that Oolite unmodded can't meet. Something as simple as showing galactic price differentials, for example. In 1984? Sure. Personal computers were, conservatively, 5 years old at that point. We didn't know what we didn't know, and we had no expectations. But it's been almost 40 years, and our expectations have changed. It may sound like I'm criticizing Oolite or its development, but that's not what I'm trying to do at all. As I said, I understand the design goal. Oolite is the best version of Elite. It's the best version of a whole set of Elite games. It really is. I mean, I've tried others. Pioneer. It's basically a tech demo. Elite Dangerous, I don't know what that is, but it's not a game. It's more of a toy. So yeah, Oolite is the best version of Elite that there has ever been. Hands down. I would never want to argue that to anyone. No one can convince me. No one can convince me otherwise. But it could be more. It is more with mods. And it could be more all on its own. Give me revamped station screens with finer control over filtering and sorting. Give me more data in the markets and incorporate the ideas of the dynamic market system OXPs. Move the planets away from their stars. Create a new baseline, a new Oolite unmodded that can stand on its own among modern indie space games. Until then, I'm going back to the OXPs. Maybe not 400 of them, but probably pretty close. I think that going forward in like a version 2.0, Oolite could really stand to differentiate itself from its original intended design goal. It is a new creature. It can be a new creature coming out of a cocoon with really brilliant, glorious wings. I think it's time. I think we've seen what it can do with the OXPs. I think we've seen what it can do without them. And I think it really needs that extra oomph. It needs an incremental change in the baseline, an incremental improvement. It needs to incorporate some of that special stuff that modders have been bringing to the game for years and years and years. I think it needs that. If it doesn't get that, that's fine. We still have the mods. I will continue to play. I will never stop playing this game. But I would love to see something more in the base. I would love to see just a few quality of life features that can really just knock it out of the park. It can still be Oolite with those things. It wouldn't change the feel of the game in a way that I think is detrimental. It would only improve it. And that's what I hope to see. I hope that someone is able to take the time to do that. I don't know anything about the current development. I have deliberately chosen not to really go into that. And so a lot of what I'm saying here may end up not being valid because like I said, I've kind of went at this blind on purpose. Um, so I don't know what is laid out for the future. I don't know what is possible for the future, but I do think there is a lot of potential here for an unmodded vanilla base game that has enough quality of life improvements that anyone coming to the game for the first time can start with the base and then add on bit by bit by bit. Years ago, I played Oolite, maybe version 1.7.5, I think it was. It's been a while, been a few years. It was certainly before the expansion manager existed. And so when I approached the game back then, I only had a sense of the unmodded version. I knew there probably were mods, I didn't check, but at the time when I started the base game, I didn't last. I think I played maybe 30 minutes and then decided, you know what? This just doesn't have what I've come to expect from a game in, the 2000s. And so I set it aside. I set it aside for a really long time and only came back to it in the last 6 months or so. And holy moly, everything has changed. Obviously, the shaders were improved, but the big thing was the expansion manager. That was the thing that made the game playable for me. I don't feel that the base game is going to suit people coming to the game for the first time. And the fact that the expansion manager is there now makes this game much more viable. But I would love to see a viable vanilla version that can draw players in just right on the get-go before they do what I did, which was just go absolutely bonkers with the OXPs. I think it can handle that. I think the game deserves that. It deserves a lot of attention. This is an excellent piece of work. It's had a lot of really loving attention over the years, continues to do. I have found the forum to be incredibly helpful, incredibly informative, responsive. The people there are very dedicated and passionate about this game. And I really want to see more people dedicated and passionate about this game. But I do think it just needs a little bit more to get there. Anyway, that's all I have to say. And so we close out the Oolite Unmodded series. This is the final episode, episode 9. What is next for me is the modded version. Probably not all 400, like I said. Probably going to cut it down a bit, just so that it doesn't go absolutely bonkers in terms of interferences with various other pieces. I know that the old version, the old series, died because of glitches in some of the OXPs, which I don't blame anybody for that. I understand that this is not exactly the easiest thing in the world to do, and it does give me the opportunity to start fresh and with a lot more knowledge of the game. So I'm actually grateful for that series 1 ending. But yeah, so I'm going to go back, start again, do a series 2. And hopefully you'll follow. Hopefully you'll enjoy. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Yeah, see you next time.